Hey everybody, my name is Matt. We're in the Rockies. I am in Jackson Hole right now. Actually, the town of Jackson. I'm in the town square. And in this video, I'm going to tell you free or cheap things to do in Jackson Hole. So Jackson is a really kind of a wealthy town. It's an upper scale town. And there's a lot of really expensive shops and a lot of amazing activities that you can do here, but they do cost quite a bit of money. So in order to help you out here, if you're visiting Jackson on at least a little bit of a budget, we want to give you some other ideas, of some free or cheap things to do. So the first thing is Granite Hot Springs. This is located about an hour south of Jackson and is actually run by the Forest Service. This is a campground, they have a waterfall, and they have hot springs there. The hot springs are actually natural hot springs that are coming from the mountain there, but they've built a little pool that you can get into and kind of swim or soak. And this pool was actually built by the CCC way back in the 1930s, I think. So it does cost a little bit of money, but because it's run by the Forest Service, it's not a terribly expensive thing. It's really only, what, like 8 or 10 bucks a person or something? $8 a person. So that's a pretty nice thing to do just south of Jackson.
And the waterfall's free.
And the waterfall's really pretty too, and that's free to go look at. So that's a nice little activity. Okay, the next free thing to do is to watch the river rafters. So river rafting is really big around Jackson. I've done a whole article on our website about everything you need to know about river rafting if you want to do it. And in fact, we're going to go on a river raft in about an hour. We're going to go on a scenic float down the Snake River right by the Tetons. But whitewater rafting is really popular here too. So again, this is about an hour south of Jackson, and people do these world famous whitewater rafting. You know, you can pay to go whitewater rafting, of course, but if you don't want to drop the coin to do that, or if you're not up for going over some of those crazy rapids, you can go just down to the canyon where they do it and get to an overlook and watch people go off of those rapids. It's a gorgeous canyon and it's pretty fun to see people. Sometimes they get thrown from the raft. Okay, the next free or cheap thing to do is right here where I'm standing. This is the town square. This is the heart of the city of Jackson. And so you definitely want to come here. They have these really famous elk antler arches at all four corners of the park. In the middle of the park here, this is a veterans memorial behind me. And up at the top, there's the guy riding the bucking bronc. That's kind of the symbol for Wyoming. But you definitely want to come and just check it out. Hang out in the park for a little while, walk around the town. You can do a little bit of window shopping if you would like. You don't have to spend money just to do the window shopping, of course. There's a little place right here called Moo's Ice Cream that's really, really good. You can get an ice cream, come and sit on the bench and just kind of people watch or just kind of enjoy the day, just enjoy the weather. They do have a little carriage ride here as well, horse and carriage ride that is not all that expensive. And they take you around the town a little bit. It's not a big thing, but just another little activity that you could do that doesn't cost that much. The next free or cheap thing to do is to visit the Jackson Visitor Center. This is the Jackson Hole Visitor Center. So up north of Jackson, up north of me, is Grand Teton National Park. Now they've got their National Park Visitor Centers, but there's also a visitor center right here in Jackson that is free to visit and is located right along the river. There's a lot of birds there. They have some pretty cool statues out in front. They'll help you out a little bit. But it's actually not a bad little stop with a little park there that you can kind of walk around or maybe have a picnic in or something like that. Okay, the next free or cheap thing to do is the Junior Ranger program for the national park. So of course, you want to visit Grand Teton National Park if you're going to be in Jackson. That is a very inexpensive thing to do in and of itself. Park passes are like $35 for a week for the park, $80 for all parks for a whole year. So national parks are very affordable. And then at the national park, if you've got kids, you want to do the Junior Ranger program, you stop into the visitor center, tell the ranger you want to do the Junior Ranger program. It's free. In almost all cases, it's free. Sometimes they'll charge you $1 or $2 just for the booklets, but typically it's free. And then at the end, if your kids get the Junior Ranger done, they will give them a little badge and swear them in.
And it's kind of a fun activity for even adults.
Yeah, and our kids are starting to grow out of it, and I'm starting to think I'm going to have to get those on my own in the future. Okay, the next free or cheap thing to do is disc golf. So over at this place called Teton Village, this is a very famous Jackson Hole resort. They have a lot of activities over there. They have a gondola where you go up to the top of the mountain. They have golfing, horseback riding. They have rock wall climbing. They have trampolines that the kids can jump on. So tons of activities there. A lot of them actually pretty affordable. But the disc golf is actually free. So if you bring your own discs or frisbees, you can disc golf for free over there. And so just make a stop at Teton Village. There's a lot of activities, especially for the kids, little water kind of splash pads that they can run through and things like that. But the disc golf is something Cheryl and I've done before. Okay, the next free or cheap thing to do is the wildlife sculptures. This is at the National Museum of Wildlife Art. This is really quite a cool facility. Now, we actually haven't been inside of it yet, just because our kids aren't going to appreciate going into an art museum. They haven't decided to spend the coin for our whole family to go in there. But right outside of the museum is a bunch of sculptures that are really nice. So it's a walking path that you can go through to walk through all these sculptures. And it's kind of set up on the hill a little bit, so you're looking down over the National Elk Refuge. And so it's not a bad little scenic spot. And then these sculptures are really amazing. The artists really have done a tremendous job. And it's just free to walk around the sculpture garden. You have to pay to go in the museum, but just to walk around outside is free. Okay, the next free or cheap thing to do is the Rockefeller Museum. This is located at Phelps Lake inside Grand Teton National Park, named after the Rockefeller family, who was so instrumental in getting Jackson Hole set aside or included with Grand Teton as the national park. So the Jackson Hole Valley being included there, that was a big thing for the Rockefellers. And so now they have a pretty new museum or a little visitor center type of a thing that you can stop at, located at Phelps Lake. Definitely, if you're in the area there, that's a nice hike anyway. To hike up to Phelps Lake is a beautiful hike. On the way, you can do the Rockefeller Museum. Okay, the next free or cheap thing to do is to ride a bike. Really popular here around Grand Teton is bike riding. And so the trails go from here in the city of Jackson up north through Grand Teton National Park to Jenny Lake. And then there's some that kind of go outside out of town over here to a little town called Wilson as well. So we did this. We rented bikes at Dornan's, which is right by the park, and rode them to Jenny Lake. And they were very affordable. So if you rent bikes, it's really not all that much for an hour or two to ride the bikes. And if you rent e-bikes, that's a different story. I can't remember if they rent e-bikes, but just a regular bike, they're not all that expensive. That's a pretty cheap thing to do and a fun thing to do if you're looking for some activities. And that's what Jackson Hole and Grand Teton are, is you want to do some activities. Okay, the next free or cheap thing to do is to attend a shootout. So right here in the town square, just on the corner over there, they hold a shootout every night at 6 p.m. Reenact, a gunslinging shootout, basically. The only night they don't do it is Sundays, because there's no killing on Sundays. But it is a free thing. You'll see crowds gather around. Again, you could get an ice cream from Moo's while you wait or something like that, and then watch the town shootout that's been going for, I think, over 50 years, which is kind of incredible, actually. So there's another free thing to do, especially something the kids might like. Okay, another thing that we haven't been to here yet, but there's a park called Baux Park, and they have rock climbing walls. So again, if you've got little kids, a pretty good little activity to take them to a park like that and let them climb the rock walls. Another free or cheap thing to do that we haven't done yet is the fish hatchery. So this is actually by the National Museum of Wildlife Art, and they've got a fish hatchery here. And we haven't been to this fish hatchery, but we have been to some other ones, and they are, to me, surprisingly interesting. I didn't think I was really gonna care for the fish hatchery the last one we went to, but it was interesting. And it's put on by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Anytime those federal government programs like that are putting on something like that, they have a little bit of money to make it interesting, and they're interesting. So one of these days we're going to try the one here in Jackson. Okay, finally, the last thing to do that's free or cheap in Jackson Hole is to kayak or swim in the lakes. So in Grand Teton National Park, there are quite a few lakes. There are 6 glacial lakes at the bottom of the Tetons. There's a larger lake called Jackson Lake that you can swim and boat in these lakes. And so, again, I mentioned Dornan's earlier. You can rent bikes from Dornan's. You can also rent kayaks from Dornan's and take them to some of the lakes and kayak around. You can get kayaks at Jenny Lake right there on the spot, so you don't even have to carry them over there. Jenny Lake offers a boat ride to go across to the hike, the famous hike Inspiration Point. That boat ride, maybe that's not super cheap, but but that's something you want to do when you're here. You can also do the kayaks. You can rent kayaks and take them over to one of the other lakes. You can just hike to one of the lakes and play in the water. Now the water's really cold. Again, it's upper elevation, so the water's pretty cold, but it is still, I've seen a lot of people playing in the water there on the shore. Our kids did it, so that's definitely another free or cheap thing to do. Hope this was helpful. We have many other resources on Grand Teton National Park and Jackson, Wyoming. So please check that out. We have playlists, our website's we'reintherockies.com. We have plenty of resources for you there. And if you need a game plan for visiting Grand Teton and Jackson Hole, we have you covered. Go to our website, we'reintherockies.com. We have an itinerary for you there. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, go west, young traveler.